Good morning and welcome back to Admit One. Later on in today's program, we will be sitting down with Sarah Beckage of Syracuse University to talk about overcoming the challenges that the pandemic has posed to high schoolers and prospective college students around the world. But first, let's begin with some news and today's big number. 1843. This was the year of the first organized sports club at an American college, the Yale Rowing Club. Now, I would like to introduce a new segment to our show. Each Wednesday, following the big number, I am going to ask a college-related trivia question. The first viewer to email the correct answer to jonathan.kubiak@collegepass.org will receive a shout-out on our next show. Today's question is this. After Yale founded their club, their rival, Harvard, started their own crew team the following year. In which U.S. state did the two teams compete in the first ever regatta, considered, quote, the cornerstone of intercollegiate athletic competition in the United States? Now, for today's news. The University of Wisconsin system has announced that it has reached pre-pandemic levels of in-person instruction. The university is now teaching 85% of their courses in classrooms across its several campuses throughout Wisconsin, including at its flagship in Madison. A new report from Common App found that 43% of applicants shared their standardized test scores in 2020-2021, compared to 77% the year prior and 73% in 2018-2019. The declines were found to be steeper for first-generation and underrepresented minority students. Harvard Business School recently moved many first-year MBA classes online, citing a rise in COVID cases fueled by the Delta variant. This temporary measure comes in response to what contact tracers believe is non-classroom related transmission. That's it for today's news. Stay tuned for an in-depth conversation with first-year Syracuse University student Sarah Beckage. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Admit One. I'm your host, Jonathan Kubiak. Today we are joined by Sarah Beckage, a current freshman at Syracuse University. And now, Sarah, all of our guests thus far in the program have been current seniors at their respective universities. And as I understand, this is your first year on campus?
Yes, this is my first year on campus, but academically I'm actually ranked as a sophomore, so my classes aren't freshmen.
Gotcha. So I wanted to start with that because many of our viewers are like you and have had much of their high school careers influenced heavily by the pandemic with remote instruction and the loss of extracurriculars and things like prom and homecoming and things like that. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about your experience as a high school student between the years of 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, especially for high school, I think it was very difficult for everyone involved because that was like junior and senior years, like those moments that you've been waiting for, like it feels like your whole life, like prom and all those activities, like you're an upperclassman and we didn't get those. Like a lot of those were taken away and they tried to do their best with like Zoom calls and COVID friendly events, but it just never was the same. And I think that's a huge reason why like people are really struggling in college now is because you never got that closure of finishing high school with all those events. So I do think it dramatically did impact a lot of people and we missed out, but the same way, like that's the world. Everyone had the same experience. It's not like you missed out from a person in another school. Everyone was there. So I think it also bonded us extremely as well.
Interesting. So you mentioned that you've noticed that a lot of your peers are struggling. Could you go into a little bit more detail about whether that's academic or socially or administratively? What exactly are the challenges that recent high school graduates and incoming freshmen are facing as a result of the pandemic?
I would say it's everything. Like I've talked to a lot of my friends is like with social media, you wouldn't notice that people are struggling, but academically it's a lot more challenging because we had more of a relaxed year with COVID. And socially, we've all been in quarantine isolated. So you have your friends that you talk to on social media, but you didn't have that face-to-face interaction that now once you go to college, it's all that and you don't have those people to rely on. So I know, like, especially myself included, like it is hard because you had that social dynamic that you've been missing for over a year. And academically, it's a lot more challenging, just the transition from high school to college as well. But especially with not getting like a proper education for a year, it is a lot harder because you don't have those core things to rely on.
What tools or strategies are you and your peers implementing to kind of overcome those academic hurdles? I know you said that you, quote, didn't have a real education for a lot of that back half of high school. How are you getting over that challenge?
I know at Syracuse here we have it's called Class, where you can go and like you can get help with any particular area. You can do group like mentoring. So there's a lot of resources that like people don't realize that are at their college. I don't know if they were here beforehand. I assume they were. That actually really help. Like we had an advisor meeting the other day, and she gave us a whole list of everything. And I went to like a writing center and got a whole paper done. Like I would just like to anyone give advice of just look on like your school's webpage of like programs they have to help you, because they're there and they like want to, and it's not taught usually by professors. It's like TAs, so people who actually know like what the material is and how to deliver it easily.
Mm-hmm. So this class, I'm sure that's an acronym. Does that stand for something as far as you know?
I don't know what it
stands for. Do you know off the top of that? But anyways, it's based on what you're saying, more of a kind of like hub or pod of kind of like outside instruction from TAs. And gotcha. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit and talk about how the pandemic kind of impacted your college application process, and more particularly whether did you end up taking an SAT or an ACT at all?
No, I never ended up taking. I took the PSAT, but I never took an SAT or ACT.
So without those scores, how did you kind of tailor your application to make yourself stand out without those standardized metrics?
Well, with those tests, I mean, a lot of places you just weren't even able to take them. Like you couldn't even take them until, I honestly, like maybe late September. I don't even know. I never even got the chance to do it. So when I went into applying, I just looked for schools that were optional for it, which was pretty much everywhere. But I know for Syracuse here, I did 2 interviews. Like those were optional, but like since they didn't have those standardized testing, like I know that was like a very important part to like them getting to know you. And honestly, like you just had to like really like have good writing material about like how you were involved extracurricularly, because they have nothing else to really rely on. But definitely the interview portion, like for any person now, I know a lot of schools are still test optional. I would recommend that, because otherwise they're just seeing a paper, and there's thousands of those.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you were still involved in extracurriculars despite remote learning and quarantine restrictions and things like that. How did you go about staying involved despite the physical distance?
So we would have like Zoom meetings instead of like in-person ones. But I mean, any chance you could take to like build something on your application, you did. So like we have a leadership club at my high school, and through the leadership club, you could also join units. Well, previously known as units, now it's Collect Life, like the organ donation center. So you could be an ambassador for that. So I would do that, and I would attend their events. I'd have to make like PowerPoints and present them to people. I mean, anything you can do, honestly, just to like put something on your application, why wouldn't you do it? And it wasn't as time consuming because it was all virtual.
Mm-hmm. So did you stay involved in the same extracurriculars that you had been involved in when classes were in person? Did you join any new ones? Did you drop out of any just because it wasn't feasible because of, I mean, for like sports or something, like it's not like you're able to go on a Zoom meeting and have the same experience. So could you speak a little bit more about how you managed that? Yeah,
I stayed in all the same clubs. Sports, though, I did not participate in. I broke my foot beforehand, so I couldn't really participate for a while. And I just never really went back into it because I didn't want to deal with like masking while running around and suffocating that way. But and I know a lot of people who still did all their sports, but it was just different, especially with the guidelines with COVID. So I just didn't really care to play a game like that. But my clubs, I did all stay involved in.
Now, Sarah, I wanted to ask a little bit more about how the pandemic influenced your specific choice of college, and not just Syracuse, but what other schools you were considering as well, and if those schools that you applied to were determined in any way by your experience as a high school student during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, so all the schools I applied to, I researched if they were going to be back in person fully, because that was a big thing to me. I didn't want to pay for a school where I was just going to sit in my dorm. I wanted to actually have that in-person learning aspect. So all of them, I applied to just a few were Ohio State, Penn State, Syracuse, Fordham, and a few others, and they were all back in person. Yeah, that's what I had. That was a big deciding factor for me. But as far as like how far away to go, I didn't really mind. I just wanted to stay kind of in like the northeast region.
Hmm. So a lot of those were really big schools. Did you like take that class size into account when you were making your list of potential university destinations, or was it just these are schools that I know, they have the program that I want, and the size
I
of them
didn't
doesn't really
really think
matter?
I didn't want to go to a small school, but at the same time, the hard thing with the pandemic is you couldn't really visit anywhere. You couldn't see the campus. A lot of people I know here at Syracuse never saw the campus until they got here. So I think that was definitely a challenging aspect is you were just kind of applying to schools you heard of because you couldn't visit or really get any more knowledge than their virtual tours, and everything's different in person than it is virtually.
Hmm. Now, I know that you are less than a full semester into your time at CUSE, and I hope that you are enjoying it. But if you could speak a little bit more and describe your particular experience coming onto the campus and being an in-person student again, and how you have been able to navigate that challenge thus far.
So at Syracuse, we are at our highest level for COVID. So we are masking everywhere besides like in your dorm. You have to mask inside, outside, classroom, everywhere. But that much isn't an issue because we've all been masking for 2 years, basically. But I would say, I mean, academically, I really like the school. I think they're known and they'll preach about their Barn Center, which is like a gym and wellness facility, but their counseling center is not it at all. I even my advisor said it's hit or miss, and I know like a lot of kids have been struggling here because their center is completely booked like within a week out, but you don't have a great experience there. So that's one negative I would say that you wouldn't normally hear about. But other than that, I would say it's been generally good experience. I don't know if you have any specific questions.
Well, so if you could go into a little bit more about what exactly you're studying and how that has been kind of influenced and impacted over the past year. Did you go into your admission cycle and application process like knowing that that was exactly what you wanted to go to school for, or did you kind of have some sort of epiphany over the past couple of years, or are you still kind of deciding what exactly it is that
I'm
you want
still
to pursue?
deciding what I want to do. I'm registered as like a bio major, but that could easily change. I mean, I have so many credits where I could literally take a year off and just figure it out. So I don't feel like pressurized to like pick something at the moment, but I am on track to be a bio major, but it could also change. So.
Mm-hmm. What would you say the most popular fields of study at Syracuse are?
Well, they have this School of Newhouse, so that's like the top third communications program in the country or something like that. So a lot of people come here for that. My roommate is actually like a music industry business major at Newhouse. They just recently switched it to Newhouse. So I know it's very selective for her. Like it's the top program in the country. So a lot of people here are here for like communications. Everything else is just like pretty regular that you'd see at any university, like business, engineering, anything in the sciences, but definitely communications is like top here.
Mm-hmm. So being so academically broad-based, what exactly was it about Syracuse that made you feel comfortable saying, this is where I want to go?
They do have a really good research facility, which is what I was planning to do with biology. And I just really love the campus. I mean, each aspect of each college, they had something like I know for the arts college, like the windows for like the painting, like at any point of time, the light will travel in so that it can hit like well. And I just thought like that was just a cool aspect that you wouldn't normally think of. But I mean, I didn't go for communications, which is really big here. But I think the facility is still amazing in all the academics.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So we're just about out of time, but before we go, I wanted to ask, is there anything that you would tell your high school self at any point, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, that you would wish that you had done differently now that you are on the other side and can look back with the benefit of hindsight?
I would say definitely don't be as stressed. Like you can fail a test and it's fine. Like you can honestly, the most important thing is to be involved. Like if you're in more clubs and you create clubs, that's more important than being a 95 or 100 student because anyone can do that. All you have to do is study, but not everyone's creating those clubs and being involved in as much as possible. And I think that's the really big thing that colleges are looking for right now.
Gotcha. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I wish you the best of luck in the remainder of your time at Syracuse. And
Thank
go
you.
Orange. Thank you.